So he let me go to the bathroom and he came with me and when I was having the drink of water, I looked up and I saw my face in the mirror and I was so shocked. And I said goodbye. And I honestly believed that was the last time I was going to see my face. Anyway, he then proceeded to tell me, even though he knew I was bleeding my mouth, that he wanted me to have oral intercourse with him. It made me feel sick. And he told me what to do and like to rub his balls and stuff like this. Anyway, after that, he then proceeded to get me on the bed and he said to me something about we're going to do it doggy fashion or something. And he then anally raped me. And all this time I kept thinking if I do exactly what he tells me, he might let me go. If perhaps I just do a complete turnaround and say that I'm enjoying it and encourage him and stuff, that he might forget what I'd done before and how much I'd fought with him. And he might let me go. At first, I wasn't sure that he knew that he was anally raping me. But then after a while, I knew for certain he knew. And I thought, how sick. He then raped me vaginally. And he said to me at some stage during all of this, you haven't done it before, have you? There was a knock at the door. I think it was, can't remember whether he had it, I think it was a doorbell or something. I couldn't work out what the noise was at first. And he just stopped and almost started in a started way, and he jumped off the bed and he seemed really agitated. And I said, what's wrong? And he said, I think that's the Dom there. Well, don't worry about it, because he obviously seemed really upset about it. And he said, no, I think it's a girl. And with that, he told me to be quiet, and he left the room. He closed his door and he told me to be quiet, stay where I was, don't move. And he walked out and down the hall and I could hear some voices. And I thought that he'd actually answered the door. So I thought, well, now or never, there's someone there. So I jumped off the bed. I opened the door. I went to run down the hall and I was screaming. He was still standing in the hallway. He hadn't gone and answered the door at all. I remember he came towards me and I can't remember what happened. I just pushed past him and he realised then that he was in trouble, I think, and he took off. And I remember I ran out the front door, and I remember as I ran out the front door I heard him. I knew he'd gone out his bedroom window. And I ran outside. I didn't have any clothes on. And I found a policewoman walking away from the unit. I remember running up towards her and she got a real shock to see me.
When my partner and I arrived at the house, we could see that Claire was in a dishevelled state. There was blood on the floor, on the walls. She was bloodied herself, and I was concerned for her physical well-being because I could see that she'd been hurt. And considering all things, I thought, well, perhaps, you know, let's get this girl to some medical attention fast, or, you know, we'll find out how she is in those terms. And I spoke with Claire and I said, you know, how are you feeling? Meaning to get some response in terms of how she was, you know, physically, where she was hurting. And her reply to me was, stupid. And I've never forgotten it.
No matter how unprovoked their sexual assault, no matter how innocent a woman may be, rape victims show a reluctance to report their attack. In this country, it's estimated that for every 10 rapes committed, only 1 will be reported. Personal reasons are most often given for their decision not to come forward, but increasingly evidence points to concern by victims that they won't be believed or they'll be blamed for their attack, that the courts and the police will not treat them with sensitivity and understanding.
So then he sat down and he asked me questions.
What sort of questions did he ask you?
First of all, he asked me how long was the rapist's penis. And I went into such a state of shock that I thought, I've got to get this man out of this lounge room.
This is the police officer?
Yes. I said, oh, I don't know. I thought, I've just got to get him out. He followed it by, was he circumcised? First thing they said to me was, why didn't you scream? And I said, I did. They said, well, obviously not very loudly. And I said, I screamed as loudly as I could. I'm very surprised next door didn't hear. They were Vietnamese. And he said, well, why didn't they hear you? And I said, I don't know. Maybe they were asleep. Maybe they had earplugs in. I don't know. I screamed. And he said, well, why didn't you keep on screaming? And I said, I was punched. He said, oh, that would account for the bruise on your face. And I said, Jenny said, oh, yeah. He was very cold, approached me. And I think I realised that A, he wasn't interested, or B, he doubted me. And this was the attitude the whole time. It was very condescending. And he's, was the hand ever released? And I said, yes, after the main assault. He said, what happened then? And I said, well, I tried to sit up. And my head was pushed back down. I said, you've read the report? And he said, yeah, but I need you to tell me. So my head was pushed back down, at which time I saw the other fellow's penis. And he said, well, why didn't you scream then? I said, because I thought he wanted me to open his mouth so he could put it in. I'm not going to scream, or I'm not going to open my mouth for him to do that. I just had my mouth clamped shut. And he said, but you could have gotten a scream out first. And I said, you've got no idea what it was like. And then the third policeman came. And I'm not sure whether he came prior to the doctor or whatever, but it was Sally having to go through the whole story for the third time. And then they said that we'd have to get the doctor in to have a check-out and just find out exactly what had really gone on. So...
This was the police doctor, was it?
This was a police doctor, yes.
He checked me over and said, you're fine. You haven't been raped, you're fine. And I said, oh, I know that. You know, I didn't ask you to come. I don't feel as though I need to be checked over, you know. And he said, oh, well, it's procedure. And he wrote out a slip and just stormed out, like frantically walk in, take off your clothes, check you over, storm out. And that made me feel disgusting, even worse. It just, I don't know how, I just felt revolting. And then when he came out, he just went to walk straight past me. And I just stopped him and I said, well, what's going on? And he just said,
she'll be all right. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, no, she's all right. So I had to ask, had she been raped? And he said no. And with that, he turned around and walked out. And it was terribly, terribly upsetting because for some reason or another, I felt guilty then. And I thought I had this terrible, I don't know, feeling of guilt, and thought, why have we put Sally through all this?
The local police arrived out on the scene. They were quite helpful. Later on, the CIB turned up, detectives. We were quite insulted by what they had said to us, asked us if we thought that Tina would have been able to do this to herself.
To actually tie herself up.
Yeah, tie herself up on the bed the way she was.
And they knew the way that she had been tied up at that stage.
Yeah. And they still asked us if we really thought she could have done it herself. Now, she would have had to have been a great woman to do that, the way that she was hog-tied backwards.
Here we have, right from the initial stage, initial contact, police officers walking into somebody's home who have been humiliated, degraded, and some very vile offences committed against them. And they must recognise that it takes a special approach, a special understanding of how to handle these victims. Not only in the initial stages, but right through the investigation, the coordination of their welfare, and right through the subsequent court cases.
During the court case, a few things happened that greatly upset me. One in particular was the fact that I went into that courtroom and I had to tell the truth about what had happened. The fact that I was a virgin has nothing to do with the fact that I was raped.
It's very difficult at times for us to go to a victim of a rape, encourage them and say, you've got to go to court. They don't know what's ahead of them. We do.
Your personal life, things that you didn't want anyone else to know, the most intimate of your life is dragged out through court. And sometimes it's put in the most disgusting manner. You really feel like running. And if you do that, all that work's gone down the tubes.
So she eventually goes in the court. Now, it may take 6 months, 3 months, 6 months to come up before the court. She's trying to readjust her life to get back to normality, if there is any such thing in this life now. Then for maybe half a day, could be a day, could be 2 days, she's put through a witness box. If it's a multiple rape and they're all on trial together, each one of the accused has got the right to have his own attorney, solicitor, barrister, call them what you like, each asking questions of her. And she's made to repeat the story over and over again. She's called a liar. There's slurs on her character. She virtually feels she's on trial. She's put on trial. Her chastity's on trial.
So you sit there and you take it, and you have no one to talk to in between. Numerous times we all got put out of the courtroom so they could have legal debate, which was very often. So you're stuck out there by yourself with the accused person who's still roaming around doing whatever he likes. And then you go back into court, and the way the court is set up, you're virtually looking eye to eye with a person you've accused of violating you.
I did what was probably the worst identikit in the history of them. I don't know how anyone does them, because I couldn't get his eyes. I couldn't put the expression. I realised since that you're not supposed to try and put expression in identikits, but all I could see was his eyes, and I couldn't do it.
After the incident happened, the next time I seen her was at the police station, St Kilda Road, police complex. And that was in a lineup.
I intend to conduct an identification parade whereby you will be placed in a line of young men similar in height and build and appearance to yourself.
The rape squad is really quite incredible. I'd been thinking it was just my little case, and yet all this amazing importance was placed on it. And yes, 2 months later, they found him.
Responsible for any offence committed upon them.
And I got a call at 3 a.m. to go and do an ID.
Any comment to make on that procedure?
I was taken into a room, expecting to be behind a glass partition or something, and I was just taken into a room and there was a row of men, and there he was. And he just looked at me with those cold eyes, and the look said, "You put me in, bitch, and you're dead."
And I got chills up and down my spine and started to get butterflies in my stomach. I felt scared because I thought, well, she did see my face and stuff, you know, and she knew who I was, more or less. But I thought that there's 10 other blokes there that look more or less pretty close to the same as what I do. And it happened 2 months ago. Like, I wasn't caught straight after it. I was caught 2 months after. And so I sort of, within myself, I felt safe that she wouldn't recognise me.
And I just said, "It's the one on the end." And they told me to actually go up and point to the person, and I couldn't. I was rooted to the spot. I was terrified of him, absolutely terrified of him. And it was then that the horror of the rape really hit me, because there he was and he was real. And there was this horrible bond between him and me that nobody else knew, just him and just me.
And when she turned around, she pointed to me. You know, so I said, bullshit. I denied it. I said, it's not me. You got the wrong person. But they had the right person. And she knew who I was, everything like that. And she sort of just looked at me with the evil eye, as if to say, about time you got caught.
Is it correct that you've just participated in an identification parade?
Yeah.
Is it also correct that you were selected as the person responsible for the rape on a female at Broadford on Thursday the 7th of March 1991?
I'll pick that, yeah.
Speak up, please, we can't hear.
Yes.
On the following Monday, he was arraigned in court because they'd caught him on the weekend, and they didn't want me to go to court that day because they felt he was ready to plead guilty, and if he saw me, it might stir him up. So I didn't go, I just waited at home. And they rang me that night and said he's pleaded guilty to all counts. And that was a tremendous relief, in a way. Part of me wanted him not to plead guilty so that I could get up and tell everybody what he did, and so that he would get more time. And I realise now how naive that was, because he had pleaded guilty and he was then to go to court 2 months later. And that day came and I wanted to go. I didn't necessarily have to go because he'd pleaded guilty, but I wanted to go. And I'm told by the rape squad that most victims do want to go.
I was trying to ignore her, trying to, sort of think that she wasn't even there. But she was there and, was sort of haunting me. As if to say, she's still around. Why is she still around? I've been caught, why can't she just let me go?
And he was in the dock, and I looked, and he wouldn't look at me. And he wouldn't look at me. And we came back in after the lunchtime session, and he was already in the dock, and I had to walk past it to get to my seat. And I literally walked sideways past the dock, looking at him, and he wouldn't look at me at all. It was over. It was broken. And at that stage, I felt the release of the bond completely was broken.
Don't you think that she wanted to ensure that you were convicted?
Of course she would have felt that way. But, it's scary enough being in the courtroom knowing that you're looking at 6 to 8 years anyway. That's what I was told that I was looking at. An 8 with a 6-year bottom.
And the judge said something along the lines of, it being sort of a common garden variety type aggravated rape. And I was blubbering at this stage. I was hopeless. But why didn't he understand what a rape was? Why didn't he understand that there's no such thing as a common garden variety one? You know, because he hadn't cut me to ribbons or anything like that, it didn't matter. And I started thinking, this boy's going to get off with a bond or something.
What did you end up getting?
6 with a 3.5 bottom, 3.5 years bottom. So, which was lucky on my behalf. But there's a lot of reports and stuff like that.
That were presented in court?
Yes. Yeah.
Hearing the psychiatrist describing him, this angry young man that had had a fight with his girlfriend, and he was angry when he got here, I kept wanting to put up my hand and say, no, he wasn't angry. He wasn't angry. He was cold-blooded. He wasn't angry. And the description of this poor young man and what had happened, see, it didn't sort of seem to be related to what had happened to me. It seemed trivialised. The defence said he asked her for her credit card. The prosecution said yes, at the point of a knife. And his side kept trying to minimalise it. The psychiatrist, when asked if he'd shown any remorse, through a long convoluted sentence basically said no, he hadn't.
I did show a little bit of remorse in the courtroom to the judge.
Like what? What sort of remorse?
I broke out in tears. It wasn't a big cry, but, you know, sort of tears rolling down my eyes, and I was scared of what time I was going to get, not because I got caught for what I'd done, just scared of how much time I'm going to do in jail.
I don't like to think of him being in prison for 6 years. I don't want him badly treated. But I do want him to know what it felt like. I want him to feel powerless over his life, like I did.
Before it happened, we would make love 4, 5, 6 times a week, on a regular basis. I love him a lot. You know, it was great. Since then, it's gotten a little better in that he can cuddle me, he can kiss me. But even now I say to him, look, why don't you just go and find someone else? I'm no good to you. As a sexual partner, there's nothing.
You've heard people say, oh, such and such was raped. And it's been, oh, well, why didn't she lay back and enjoy it? Or, you know, oh, she's a woman on her own, divorced. So her luck's changed. And although in the past I didn't like those, it was now very close to home. And so those sayings had a great effect on me.
What do you think of the chances of you staying together?
It varies from week to week. 3 weeks ago I would have said they were very good. At the moment, 20 to 80% chance.
What, against or?
Against, yeah.
After quite a long while, it would have been probably 4 or 5 weeks I hadn't been out. I hardly left the house. I missed a lot of uni, and I thought, this is ridiculous. I've got to get on with my life. And I went out to the hotel for a couple of drinks with about 6, 7 girlfriends. Not close girlfriends. Girlfriends who I catch up with now and again. One of them was a close girlfriend and she knew about it. The others didn't. And they were sitting there and they were talking about it, and I was saying, one was a nurse and she said, oh, I was at work today and this incident is still in the newspapers. I can't believe it, you know, that poor girl. And she said, and I was at work today and I was talking to one of my nursing friends and And I said to her, isn't it terrible what happened to this girl? And she said, it's a load of rubbish. She said, as if it could happen, she said, she'll be some tart, cheaply dressed up, off her face, asking for it. And I didn't say a word. I couldn't. I wanted to stick up for myself, but I was sitting there thinking, people can't be saying this about me.
I don't understand why the judge couldn't see it. He had all the evidence, the clear-cut evidence of what had happened to me. It wasn't like there was anything ambiguous about it. I think if I was a girl that had been date raped, I would think seriously about whether I'd report it on the basis of what happened to me in court. Because mine was straightforward. They must really suffer.
I wonder now what jail has done for him. And I wondered for the whole time he was in jail whether it was doing him good. And I was frightened after he came out that his life was good before the rape, that his life was going well, he had a good job, that I'd destroyed all of that for him by standing up for my rights. And I was worried, and I fear, and I still fear, that one day he might come looking for me to get back at me for what I've done to him. You know, every time I give my address out to people, I wonder whether perhaps he might one day be working somewhere or doing something and see my name and my address, find out where I'm living. Everyone tells me that it will never happen, but there's always that fear.
Since filming this documentary, Joan's rapist has not been apprehended. The man arrested for the attack of Louise is found guilty of 5 counts of rape and 1 of indecent assault. He receives 4 years of imprisonment, but lodges an appeal.